All right, so welcome everyone to today's SCOPE webinar, which is part of our series featuring Yukon University's research chairs and leaders. We're hosting this talk with respect and gratitude on the traditional territory of the Kwamandun First Nation and the Tanquatching Council. My name is Sabrina Kinsella, and I'm the Acting Science Advisor for Yukon Government. I'm pleased today to welcome Brian Horton, Manager of Climate Change Research at Yukon University. Brian was raised in Whitehorse before moving south to complete his studies, a Bachelor of Science in Earth Science and a Master's in Geography with a focus on glaciology and climatology. Brian's professional path has included policy work with Natural Resources Canada and work as a research associate at the Centre for Earth Observation Science at University of Manitoba. In his current role, Brian supports and leads a team that addresses industrial, community-based, and Yukon-wide research needs in support of climate change-related planning and adaptation. Today, Brian will give us an introduction to his team and their work before launching into an interactive discussion of the draft action plan. Your feedback on the plan and any gaps in emerging issues, as well as opportunities for collaboration, is welcomed and encouraged. I'll turn the mic over now so Brian can get started. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks very much, Sabrina. I'll just sort of repeat the expression of gratitude and deep respect for the Kwamandun First Nation and the Tanquatching Council, acknowledging their stewardship of this land and our place on it now. Yeah, I'm excited to sort of present myself, my team, and discuss a little bit about some of the work that's going on here at Yukon University. And I'm sort of scanning the names of folks that are on the call here. It's great to see some friendly faces, familiar names here, and looking forward to connecting with those of you that I haven't met yet. So yeah, I wanted to sort of begin, I guess, by now. Let me see. I gotta get the this happening and that happening. I wanted to connect about where I see the work of my small group at Yukon University going over the next few years. And to ground that conversation, I'd like to introduce them. I'd like to give a little bit of information about what we've been up to over the last few years, and then open a conversation for your input on where we could be going in the next few years. So yeah, with that, I'll dive in. And just give me a wave, maybe, if you're Sabrina or anybody else, if you're seeing the slides, I hope. Yes, no?
Yes, but they're in presenter mode right now. So you want to swap the...
What? This is a mystery. Okay. Maybe? Full screen?
Not yet.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I'll just forge ahead here. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna share screen. I'm gonna do that. Anybody who's like a total master at this already, I'm so impressed by you. I mean, I've been practicing for 2 years and still can't get it most of the time. Better?
Good now. Yeah.
Hey, all right. Yeah, so here's my group. Here's the team that I am very fortunate to lead. So I am manager of a group of, right now, there's about 7 folks plus a couple of students that are working with us. I manage a diverse group. There's a whole lot of breadth in the work that we do. So I really don't feel comfortable describing myself as a researcher. Over the past couple of months, you've heard from, a bunch of folks in other parts of the YukonU Research Center who are really driving research in particular areas. And I'm so inspired by the work that they do. And I'll mention some of the bits of crossover that we have with that work. But yeah, there's a pretty skilled team that I am sort of leader of. And so I try to help them where I can, but I don't consider myself a leader of research or I guess a researcher myself anymore. Sabrina mentioned bits of my bio. So I did train in University of Calgary as a scientist, but have lost the touch on many parts of that. So yeah, Allison is sort of a specialist in social science, northern adaptation, and resilience. Benoit is a research professional in northern hydrology. Cyrielle has been developing all sorts of competency around geospatial analysis, and her in particular, she crosses over into one of the other research groups, which drives a lot of the permafrost research happening here at the YukonU Research Center. Ellery is helping with a specific project, a collaboration with the Klawani First Nation government, which is called Bringing Research Home. Mache has been the driver of a lot of our education and outreach activities over the last couple of years. Rachel is coordinator of all of the things, but really helping to try to open up a couple of new areas of research, and I'll get to more on that later. And last but certainly not least is Steffi, who is working with the hydrology group, but also really sort of excelling in different types of geospatial analysis and remote sensing work. So it's a great group, and I'm certainly honored to be able to manage them on a day-to-day basis. We're not all that's happening in terms of climate change work at Yukon University Research, or sorry, at Yukon University. So I've just tried to list a whole bunch of the areas that I am aware of there being some pretty specific focus on climate change work. So already, like within the sort of academic and sort of student focus work, there's a lot of areas where climate change comes up. There are two specific research chairs that have quite a specific, there are two research chairs who have a dedicated focus on climate change. So we saw Jocelyn Jostrack present a couple of weeks ago, and then also there's Dr. Fabrice Calmels, who is a permafrost and geoscience specialist. In addition to that, there are the industrial research chairs, and I believe both of them have also presented to this group in the last number of weeks here. So Northern Energy Innovation and Northern Mine Remediation both include aspects and dimensions of the climate change challenge. And then finally, we get down to the research program areas. And so that's my group. So I put a little animation here. That's the group that I manage. And then there's also the strategy for patient-oriented research, currently led by Dr. Darius Smith. So quite a lot going on. And the remainder of my talk is really focused on that what I manage arrow there. So I'm just sort of talking about one tiny slice. So I'll turn then to what frames a lot of the work that my group does. And this is so hot off the press that it's not even citable yet formally. But earlier this week, the IPCC second working group released their summary for policymakers. And in it, there is this sort of convoluted, colorful figure that really helps tell the story of the imperative for adaptation in conjunction with action to mitigate and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There is this imperative to adapt. There's a turn in the language coming out from the sort of Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They are sort of bringing in this term of climate resilient development. And it's described as a sort of a more coordinated effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt in support of sustainable development. And ideally, we're going along on that green path, sort of in the center here. And realistically, right now, much of the path has been sort of more towards the yellow or reddish orange in the figure here. The little zigzags that you see here and there are those intermittent disruptions, whether it's a sort of a climate-related shock, such as particular flood event, or a gradual change, such as permafrost thaw, or it could also be non-climatic shocks. But either way, resilience thinking helps insulate from those disruptions. So my group spends a lot of time thinking about what are those actions that help build resilience? What are the specifics around measures that we can implement now that help guard against shock? We did an action plan a few years ago, at a high level, I think that action plan really helped provide a basis of stability. It helped us sort of think in new ways about new and expanded partnerships. We are still sort of working to improve the our sort of our efforts on multiple fronts to communicate what we're doing and to contribute that in the sort of formal academic channels. We feel that the research that we're doing is of good quality, but we are still sort of struggling to find the time to contribute that in the peer-reviewed literature. We also really work to include students in our work, but the sort of realities, the day-to-day operational realities, can sometimes be a challenge, I guess. So we're still work in progress there. We've been trying to sort of build up an idea around climate services, and so far it feels like it's been a dead end. There's been a lot of effort put towards this, and climate services is sort of a catch-all term for really reimagining how climate data are shared and making sure that that those data are being really efficiently and effectively communicated to as many audiences as possible. And yeah, I guess we've had a couple of big ideas there, and so far they have yet to really land. So yeah, that's a bit of progress since our last action plan. And I'll turn now to just sort of describing a few of our main areas of activity over the last couple of years in terms of specific topic areas within the adaptation conversation where we've been contributing. So the first one I'll focus on is work on northern hydrology and climate change. I mentioned Benoit Percot as our sort of lead of the hydrology work that's happening here. And over the past year or so, he's really built up some momentum around completing assessments of flood infrastructure and flood vulnerability for several communities. We've initiated some really neat collaborations with the Champagne and Aishihik First Nations, and that includes also Yukon Energy Corporation and Yukon government on a specific project to model ice in the Aishihik River downstream of the Aishihik generating facility. And then at the national level, he's also been working to improve discharge estimation methodologies for ice-affected rivers. And that's something that it's work funded by Environment and Climate Change Canada, and we definitely see potential for that to grow into influencing sort of the national picture of how winter conditions or discharge during winter is estimated. So a few sort of I guess nested examples of different places, different scales that we're working on. On the right there, I've included a map that's I think going to be online any day now, but it's showing a number of infrastructure assets in Dawson City, and the color coding of the little dots is indicating their vulnerability in the case of a 200-year flood event. So that's an estimated 200-year flood event. One specific thing that I'll draw attention to is the elevation of the dike surface, and so that was something that Steffi and Benoit were able to map. The 200-year flood event is estimated, and it's funny. It's the distance upstream. So on the x-axis there, the distance upstream from the gauging station, which is downstream of Dawson. So how confusing is that? But there are these little tiny chunks of the dike, the bits that are covered by blue here, where water will overtop the dike for very short sections in Dawson. So in the event of a 200-year flood event. So One suggestion here that we've shared with the Toronto government and with the relevant folks at City of Dawson and Yukon government is the suggestion of just a grade raise on some pretty short chunks of the dike. So that's one example of some of the work that Benoit has been leading over the last year here. In the adaptation and resilience policy area, we've been collaborating for several years with the Kluane First Nation, and this Bringing Research Home project is one where we're really trying to work to improve the accessibility of research for KFN citizens, where we're providing opportunities to set research for KFN to voice expectations of researchers who are conducting work in their traditional territory, and to identify priorities, research priorities that KFN themselves have. So so that's been an ongoing project for a few years now, and continuing for the next couple of years here. Elsewhere, we've contributed to the Yukon government assessment of climate risk. And then we're also participating in a number of these sort of national level discussions, one of which is that Government of Canada is currently developing a national adaptation strategy. And we've been participating in the advisory, sort of the blue sky thinking of what the goals and actions of that strategy should be. That's now out for provincial and territorial consultations with sort of government to government. And there are other sort of levels of consultation planned, but it's been exciting to contribute to some of the blue sky thinking within that process. Last but not least is that we are sort of continuing to work on the sort of mobilization of climate knowledge and reaching out to different audiences. So the climate change information mainstreaming program has been a mainstay of that activity for a number of years and is really focused on that's so Yukon government funding that we've been provided to really help develop training materials and share those training materials with Yukon government officials. One of the main parts of that has been a sort of a course targeting decision makers within Yukon government, but other elements of it have included, reports like an indicators report that we did a few years ago, and that the next edition of that is out any day now, I guess, any day, hopefully in the next couple of months here. Meanwhile, we've also been trying to contribute and lead some of the national synthesis, science synthesis documents. So there's a North chapter for Natural Resources Canada's National Adaptation Synthesis that's coming out again any day now. So it's sort of in the final copy edit stage right now. So those are a couple of examples of some of the knowledge mobilization and outreach work that we've been doing. So now is when I really need your help. I want to share the vision and mission for my group here. You can read it off the page, but we're really trying to envision a future where Yukoners have the knowledge they require to make climate-informed decisions, and that with our northern neighbors, we're resilient to the impacts of climate change. Our part in that vision, so the big picture vision is sort of outward looking, and certainly we play a role there, but other actors will have to contribute there too, and already are. But our mission in terms of the high level things that we want to be doing are to generate and share climate knowledge tailored to the needs of a rapidly changing North, and then to reflect all knowledge systems, including Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing, while we're helping the North prepare for climate change impacts. So in the next stage here, I'll open it up to discussion, but I'll just quickly hit these points now. We've drafted as a team and with help from others, we've drafted a few core commitments to include students and community-based youth in our work, to really reflect diverse knowledge systems and perspectives throughout our all steps of our work, to really understand truth and reconciliation as it relates to research, and then make intentional efforts to weave weave our understanding of truth and reconciliation into our practices. And this last one is tricky, but we'd like to have a material impact on increased climate resilience. And the world over has really struggled to measure progress on climate change resilience and to measure the result of adaptation action. So there gets to be a bit of abstract thinking that happens there, but we really want to start documenting that, yeah, we're making progress. We're moving the needle on increased climate resilience for Yukon. So we're already committed on a few things with the funding that we have in place and with the people that we have on the team. So over the next couple of years, we hope to continue to gradually build on our policy work. The Northern Hydrology Group is poised for a pretty big increase pretty quickly here, but then hopefully it's stable for a bit, and then we can increase again later. And I'd like to sort of I've got a proposal out there in the world to sort of rapidly increase our outreach and knowledge mobilization work, and then hopefully it stabilizes for a while. And then there are topics where we're just aware that there are opportunities to grow the work, and it doesn't feel like there's anybody super active on the topic right now. And so examples of that are, sort of agriculture focused research, wildfire focused research. There are certainly people doing good quality work on that, but we think we might be able to contribute more. And then there's the unknown. So there's a bunch of places where I'd like to welcome your input there in a couple of minutes. Oh, and I've missed a thing. No, I haven't missed a thing. So that's it for me talking at you. Thank you. And so from here, I'll invite you to click on this Jamboards are cool link, because I think Jamboards are really cool. And I'll copy and paste it into the chat box as well. And then, yeah, then it's discussion time. So there we are. So yeah, maybe I'll first open for any immediate reactions and questions, and then we can go through these questions one by one. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen. Hopefully that's all right. And yeah, any sort of comments or feedback immediately that's jumping to mind after I've talked at you for a bit here?
I'm happy to jump in first. I'll first introduce myself. I know a bunch of people on the call from the names. I'm Hilary Cook. I'm a conservation scientist with Wildlife Conservation Society Canada, based here in the Yukon, and I've been here for about 12 years. And one of the things that really resonated and I'm kind of excited about is exploring partnerships with your group, which has been kind of my intention for a long time, but just hasn't happened yet. And we have a couple of climate adaptation projects going on right now with my colleague Crystal Mantika Pringle, and my other colleague Don Reed is on the call as well. We're looking at climate refugia mapping, projections for species distribution modeling. I'm also doing some wildfire related work, which is not necessarily mitigating risk to communities, but more in the ecological setting. So I guess I just thought I'd pop on to say that I think, the Yukon is a small place, we all know each other, but there is a tendency for us to get siloed in our research and our work. And so I guess this is just a plug for partnerships and even forums that actually bring people together to discuss what they're doing as a first step. So.
For sure, yeah, and it's fun to hear that feedback. I like you say, I think we've all kind of been peripherally aware, but we do get dug in on what we're doing. Mm-hmm. We had the adaptation forum last year, and that was the first time in probably 4 or 5 years that many of us kind of came into one digital space to talk adaptation for a couple of days. And And, as part of preparing for, developing a new action plan for my group, I was looking through some of the notes and realized we're still not scratching the surface on a lot of the big ideas that have come up in that in that forum. So, there's so much cool thinking that came forward during the adaptation platform around, partnerships and rethinking how partnership happens, and around sort of systems thinking and around the sort of integration of sort of new thinking with the, to get together today for our children tomorrow, yeah. I hear you.
Unfortunately, I think I missed that. Either it wasn't on my radar or I couldn't attend. So that's too bad, but I'll look for that. Actually, if there's a report from that forum, that would be great to see.
For sure. I'll find the links to the content, or much of the content is still online. So yeah. I see Bob has camera on. Hello, Bob. You're still muted.
There we go. Hello, Brian. Haven't seen you in a while. I've got a couple of questions or ideas. One is the Network Research or Center of Excellence ArcticNet, the zombie that refuses to die. And I keep looking at their website, and they keep saying they're associated with Yukon University. And I guess one of the reasons to keep going was an IRIS-5 integrated, integrated regional impact studies. They did 4 in the Inuit regions. They were supposed to be doing a 5th one for the terrestrial side. Is that happening?
Yeah, so I'll sort of respond to a couple of things there. The IRIS-5 is happening. I'm not leading it, but I believe that Fabrice is quite involved. I'm not current on my understanding of precisely how it's going to be done, and I'll back up just a step and say the irises they were done on a region by region basis, and they ended up as a big thick document summarizing all the science of all the things, generally from a pretty Western science perspective, and then they would get printed out and shipped off and forgotten about. So I believe that ArcticNet is trying to sort of reimagine that process rather than doing the big thick document as one single thing. They're trying to do it in a series of smaller sort of packages, I guess, and also really focusing on digital delivery, and bringing in a broader diversity of knowledge systems to those reports. But again, Fabrice is the lead, to my knowledge, at least for any Yukon-based content going in there. So happy to connect you with them, and yeah, maybe if you want a private message through the Zoom chat box there, what the best way to reach you is if you want to learn more there. The other point is that the ArcticNet zombie. ArcticNet has certainly, I would say, pivoted. They've changed their. There's been big changes in the leadership structure there, and to the benefit of YukonU ultimately. There have been direct funds awarded to help us build research capacity on our own terms, and so that's been really positive. And I think that they've also become much more inclusive of a broader range of science perspectives and Indigenous knowledge perspectives. So I have been sort of encouraged to see that. You might, folks on the call might be aware of other of the networks of centers of excellence, and also that the networks of centers of excellence will cease to exist as a thing in the next couple of years here. So the federal government has sort of developed a new funding structure for these major science networks, and the first round of that is, sort of the competition for the first round of that is underway right now, but yeah, to be determined what sort of things they're going to be interested in.
Okay, and one further question. Are there links at all with the Arctic Council? Because things you mentioned, like forest fire, there's a number of work being done in a couple of the working groups of the Arctic Council on that, for example.
Yeah, I have not made a lot of effort in joining the international discourse on the Arctic Council being one example, but yeah, I haven't made a huge effort on that. I've felt more personally, I'm more drawn to the sort of local level conversations, the regional and national discourse, and that's where I feel that I can have the greatest impact. So yeah, at this point, I haven't been putting a lot of priority on that sort of international collaboration. The institution, meanwhile, has rejoined UArctic and is participating there, but personally, I'm not directly involved in that very much.
Okay, yeah, because I think back to ACIA, Arctic Climate Impact Assessment work that was done probably, close to 10 years ago now, and that was really inclusive and dug down to the regional level.
Yeah, no, like I said, I've sort of unplugged from a lot of that, but yeah, perhaps this is you're prodding me in the direction of get back involved, Brian.
Yeah, I think it might be a role if you're looking at expanding and increasing partnerships. It might be a place to explore, because there's wildlife work going on, climate change impacts, resilience, all kinds of stuff. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I note in the comment box here, Richard, you've provided a few examples of snow loads, rain loads, water tables, foundations. Okay, yeah, there's lots of really interesting ideas in there, and certainly, Richard, I don't know if you wanted to add anything there on Mike, or had.
There's one thing I forgot is whether we're going to actually see more wind loading. It's pretty benign, I think. I don't know. We've had talks, I think, at the Science Institute on different climate models, but none of them seem to be agreeing at the moment as to what's going to happen up here, except that it's going to be more extreme than anywhere else in the world. Resilience of infrastructure and property is a difficult one to predict for the next 50 years. But, yeah, I think there's the Canadian Standards Authority has brought out specific standards for the north. It's worth keeping an eye on, seeing whether they're still relevant, to be honest, or should we be revising?
Yeah. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. So it's there are I think 5 or 6 guidelines as they're described right now for sort of specific to northern issues. So I am aware that there's a snow loads guideline. There is a sort of geotechnical investigation guideline. There's a permafrost environments and a community drainage planning guideline. So those are some of the examples. Once they enter the CSA domain, they sort of also become part of a 5-year renewal cycle. So they do make an effort to keep them current. However, these keyword guideline, right now there is no sort of legal obligation for them to be implemented in northern construction. So I know a couple folks on the call here are directly involved in the update of those. My shop has not been in the most recent iteration of those guidelines, but certainly it's a relevant topic and something that we're I guess interested in at least making sure that it doesn't stop happening. One other
good to see you on the ball anyway. And yes, we do need to be very vigilant about keeping property that's the value of it, as it were, and not letting them fall to bits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one other sort of iron in the fire, I didn't sort of go into the minutia of how we're funded, but we do apply for project funding to various funding agencies, government departments, and that sort of thing. And we're still waiting to hear back on one that's sort of trying to help combine or layer together the hazard mapping that we did in collaboration with the Yukon Geological Survey a few years back, with information about property characteristics and then use that to build sort of site-specific guidance for Yukon infrastructure. So another one to consider. Perhaps also of interest to you specifically, Richard, and others perhaps, is that there's this. It originated as an Engineers Canada initiative, and I believe it now is sort of stewarded by a group called the Institute of Catastrophic Loss Reduction. But it's a specific tool for use by engineers, the PIVC tool. Don't ask me what the acronym is, but or what it stands for, but it's basically an infrastructure vulnerability assessment tool that really helps explore climate vulnerability for any number of different infrastructure types. So there is the sort of the full tool, which really only engineers are like others can participate or contribute, but it's an engineering tool. And then there's a sort of just released in the last month or so, there's a PIVC Lite that's more intended for a general audience. So I've been taking notes here and there, and maybe sorry, Michelle, you've got the health side of climate change. I have thought about it. Do you, how to move forward there? So I mentioned Alison Perrin during the introduction, and she was able to contribute a couple of years ago to a report that the Chief Medical Officer of Health published that was looking at climate change and health and trying to sort of put some frame around indicators, things to watch for Yukoners. That's a deep pool. It's such a deep pool to go into. So yeah, yes, I've thought about it. Do I have specific action around it? Let's talk. And Lyris has ducked off because she's got she's lecturing now for her teaching obligations, but yeah.
I do think it would be good to talk about, because I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So when you had that slide about what are we missing, and I think the health side of it, especially when it comes to Indigenous ways of knowing, doing, and being, I think we could do a lot of work there potentially.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Brian, this is Jacqueline from Yukon Government Health and Social
Services.
Oh
Yeah, you're from Health, yeah. Hello.
Yeah, we are doing a bit of work there, mostly in relation to the commitments around our clean future, but some of that doesn't border on research, but I think there's definitely some opportunities. So yeah, we should connect later about that as well. I'd be really keen to link up. Super.
Yeah, no, I'd like that for sure. Okay, I'm gonna share screen here, and I know that whoa, did I messed it up. There, resume share. Hopefully you're seeing the Jamboard. So there, resharing. Yeah, so I have a feeling many of you have probably used Jamboards, but if you haven't, I find them lots of fun because they're anonymous. So that's one thing. And they're sort of interactive. I can invite you can each sort of contribute a sticky note. So or as many sticky notes as you like. So I've just added a big green one. Here I am. So for those not familiar, the fourth icon down on the left is a sticky note, and you can click that, and then hopefully you should be able to just add any text and edit and make suggestions. So I'll open the sort of the conversation. So you can click forward and back on the top there if you want to just jump ahead, but looking specifically for feedback first on the sort of vision and mission, and whether these statements resonate, and if there are additions, subtractions, revisions suggested there. I'm trying to get there we go. Okay, now I've got it so I can see people as well as the screen. So so maybe sort of looping back to your point, Bob. I mean, your thought around sort of engagement with oh, there we go. Anonymous, you're thinking on the same lines as me. Is the northern neighbors, you know, are we thinking just Canadian or international, or you know, yeah, just what are we thinking there? Does anybody have thoughts on, you know, I guess I try to balance, you know, well, I acknowledge my own bias in terms of a sort of think and act local and hopefully impact global, but yeah. It feels like we have enough to do locally, and maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe I'm not learning enough from the international community. Should we be explicit in this vision to try to you know, either narrow to neighbors means Yukon or Canadian North, or should we be you know, much more inclusive there? So I'm seeing lots of stickies starting to show up. So that's super, super helpful. Yeah, and the partnership. Yeah, we can make that more explicit. Yeah. This is great. Sorry, I'm reading at the same time here. One thing I've noticed is that there seems to be an evolution away from the risk terminology. I don't know if other people have noticed that, but risk and risk management seemed to be dominant in the climate change adaptation conversation for quite a while. And it does seem like we're trying to, as a sort of group, move away from that. I don't know if others have noticed the same. And I see a sticky there about how will research inform barriers and gaps that prevent Yukoners from making climate informed decisions. So I'm not sure if that's sort of referring to sort of social justice issues and social equity. Is that maybe a way of interpreting that? like how will we overcome housing insecurity and how does that contribute to increased resilience? Is that a way of understanding that?
Yeah, that was my point. And I just, yeah, was wondering how your research would tie in there. So obviously, yeah, Yukoners might be well informed on actions that they may be taking through your research, but I guess maybe even, I'm just curious at linkages between like maybe policies that like currently exist that prevent those actions from being taken, or yeah, just at like social justice and equity lens. That's what I'm curious about, how it links in.
A good question. Okay, I'm so happy to have this input because it is, you know, it will challenge me to think and to focus here. So I don't know if I'll be able to respond to everything on the line here, but very helpful. I will maybe advance the slide here to the second one and ask if there are any suggestions for additional core commitments. And to sort of explain my thinking here is these are the ideas that, you know, we want to try, or the things that we want to try to build into every project we do. So I don't know if there are there already in the earlier slide there was there were comments that relate to this for sure, but welcome any additional thoughts here. One thing with the student and community-based youth is like I would love to be able to do more with graduate students. Right now, YukonU has a number of undergraduate programs, and we're fortunate to be able to attract a few of the students in those programs to work with us sometimes. But I'm certainly aware that the scale of the issues really benefits from bringing as many new ideas and new you know, new students into the issue as possible. So it's a bit of a challenge to bring new graduate students into the conversation, just because of the sort of structure of YukonU right now. But certainly it's always been beneficial to have as many people in the room as we can there. And I see Rebecca has put up her hand. Go for it, Rebecca.
Hi, Brian. Hi, folks. I wrote this on a sticky note, but I had too much to say. I couldn't fit it on. Excuse me. I just want to really connect with that original vision statement there. Yukoners have the knowledge required to make informed decisions. You know, I've stepped out of policy. I've stepped out of government. I'm suddenly I'm kind of a normal, non-academic, non-policy person, and I'm really seeing the need to, yes, do the good work that you're doing in other organized climate organizations, but how do we continue to enhance our ability to actually communicate that to the common folks on the ground? There's a real need to continue to generate understanding, even beyond. I mean, you guys do really good work with the decision makers course for government audiences and whatnot. I'm talking about going a step further, and you know, it can be big work, but it doesn't have to be big work. It's taking the amazing work that you do and finding the, you know, common language communication pieces just to get it out into the common parlance. I think that's an important piece to shift the energy and dialogue around climate change knowledge.
Very good question. I don't have a straight answer for you. I will acknowledge that my my own work, like I could strengthen my own practices on exactly that. So certainly, yeah, have to think about how to do that more. It does feel sometimes like there's a lot going in that conversation already, but then it's also you know, it's like it comes up in my Facebook feed or my, you know, my Google News feed, but is that just some AI robot deciding that I should see more climate changey stuff just because they've been paying attention? I don't know. I'd love to hear thoughts on the sort of inclusion of different knowledge systems, and sort of acknowledging that there's, you know, at least for what we're doing right now, we try to distinguish between, you know, really honoring Indigenous knowledge and local knowledge as sort of distinct areas. There is so much knowledge among the sort of people that have been living in the Yukon for, you know, for a couple generations, and then there's a completely different knowledge system that applies to sort of indigenous ways of knowing. And so, yeah, I wonder if there are any thoughts on that.
They'd be a fantastic resource to say, this is how it was. And I think everybody here's got an idea of what it is now. And you can see how things are moving.
Yeah.
So as a reference point, as a baseline, that's great. I don't think the First Nations have been through anything like this before. So what's going to happen is as good as our guess is as good as theirs. To be honest, I think we're all in the same boat as going forward.
Yeah, for sure. That seems like a, you know, like that's a message that I've heard in the past as well. One of the things that I'm learning more and more, and sort of from colleagues and from, you know, sort of time spent in the Yukon is I'm curious how sort of teachings from Indigenous knowledge can show us resilient practices, resilient actions that really apply regardless of future conditions. And that's something that I'm curious about, but don't know how to directly action, I guess. So.
I don't know about that. There was a talk at McBride's a few years ago, and we had a talk from people from Mulcrow, and there was a lot of consternation about melting permafrost and changing vegetation types and changing in habitat for caribou and stuff like that, and they're changing hunting patterns, and they were at a loss to what to do. So, you know, I would repeat that we're all in the same boat now. We just don't know where we're going.
Right. Yeah. 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 There's definitely some pretty intimidating stuff when you look at, you know, climate model projections and then conduct the sort of next steps. And I think Hillary and Paula and others probably have, you know, a direct hand on that, or a direct awareness of that from the work that they're doing. Okay, I'm gonna flip to the next slide here and just ask. We've got 5 minutes remaining, so I know that folks likely have to dip into the next meeting or step away if that's the case. By all means, but if you have time to you know, identify any research gaps, and there's been a lot of input on that already, so so thank you for that. And if you can think of any others. What are the blind spots? What are areas where we're just totally you know, like where there's, you know, where there's a real need, and you know, acknowledging also that we're one actor of many in this adaptation space in the territory. So you know, maybe it's already being done by somebody else. But yeah, if there are any sort of thoughts on gaps or sort of blind spots, I'd welcome those thoughts now.
Hi, Brian, this is Ella.
Hello.
I'll just chime in to say that I added in there from Water Resource Branch here. We wanted to explicitly just mention and advocate for more research on groundwater, specifically around groundwater and surface water interactions, especially groundwater and flooding, and effects of climate change on groundwater. So we have partners outside of the territory, academics doing research on this, but it'd be really, really great to have more YukonU focus.
For sure. Yeah, I guess we, Emily was on the call earlier. I don't know if she continues to have any hydrogeo work in her portfolio, and then Brendan as well. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I'm here on behalf of Brendan.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah. Tipping point. Somebody's added tipping points. Oh man, that's so cool. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what we do with it, but the lack of baseline information is another. Yeah. Yeah, to me as well, sort of related to that is that it feels like there have been, like I'm aware of 3 or 4 different data inventory activities going on, all kind of similar, but somewhat different. And I have joked before that there's a need for an inventory and the portal, because, you know, we have all these sort of the divergence of needs and you know, the nuance that comes in with different subject areas quickly becomes very confusing to follow. But equity and social justice, yeah, that I would love to. I'll have to think more on that as well. Acknowledging that was a really sort of prominent theme in a lot of what was sort of discussed during the adaptation platform last year, and yeah, so certainly more to think about there. So I'm going to leave this Jamboard link open for the rest of the week here. So if you're sort of going through your day and want to add anything, I'll see the input if you add it later on. So feel free to come back to it. Maybe I'll thank you now for the input, for the time, and for the consideration that you've given here, and turn back to Sabrina to see if there are any closing statements.
Thanks, Brian. That was excellent. Really great to see people jumping in to add to the Jamboard or to chime in verbally. And great presentation and very engaging process. So I hope that it's given you something you can work with, and I'm sure you'd love to hear from folks who have feedback afterwards, or if they add right to the Jamboard. That's awesome. And yeah, thanks again. We'll be taking a break from Scope Talks for spring break, but hope to see folks on March 24th when we'll have Fabrice Kamel. And hope the rest of your day goes well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I've just added my my email address there in the chat box if anyone has follow-up thoughts. And yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity, Sabrina.
Thank you. Take care.